So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's ACEVO webinar, which is on digital transformation for volunteer programs in 2025 and beyond. I'm Pete Johnson, Head of Income Generation at ACEVO, and I'm delighted to be chairing this session today. Now, as you all know, volunteer programs are at the heart of so many charities and non-profits, and increasingly in a digital world, volunteer programs need to evolve in order to stay effective, scalable, and impactful. Now, today we'll be discussing what successful digital transformation actually looks like in practice and how you as leaders can steer your organizations in the right direction. In this session, we'll cover key drivers behind successful digital transformation and how leading organizations like St. John's Ambulance, British Heart Foundation use technology to increase their impact. Also, we'll touch on new legislation, specifically Worker Protection Act, how you can help your staff and volunteers be in an inclusive environment. Now, I'm joined today by Sam Bennett, who's the sales lead for UK and Europe at Rosterfy, and who are a leading provider of volunteer management software, working with top organisations, not just in the UK, but around the globe. And we also have Maddie Stark, who's digital transformation specialist at SCVO, who brings a deep experience in helping charities navigate and implement digital change. For those of you that don't know about ACEVO, we are a membership network for civil society leaders, and we support those leaders to drive positive change within their organisation and communities. And Rosterfy is a global leader in volunteer management, and SCVO, covering Maddie's bit, SCVO is the national membership body for Scotland's voluntary sector. Now, just a quick housekeeping before I pass on to Sam and Maddie. In terms of live transcription, we're using Zoom transcription and captions, which can be found in the bottom menu of your screen. So if you do need that, you can enable it now. And please use the chat for comments and networking, but for any questions, please use the Q&A box. And after our presenters have spoken, which will be for about 40 minutes, we'll then go to Q&A and we'll try and cover as many questions as possible. Okay, I think that's it for the introduction and housekeeping. Sam, over to you.
Thanks very much, Pete. I'm just going to share my screens. Hopefully you'll be able to see that in just a sec. If I can just get a thumbs up, Pete, that's come through okay. Excellent. I'll try and keep my bit fairly brief. We've got Maddie today, who's joined us from SCVO. I think spent 10 years in the volunteering sector with them. So really excited to hear some of the trends that she's seeing. I'm going to do a quick introduction to Rosterfy, and then I want to make sure we enable some time for questions at the end. So just running through, we've been ACEVO partners now, I think, for a couple of years. Rosterfy have been in the market for about 11 years, and that entire time we've lived and breathed volunteering. So everything is volunteer based. We're a volunteer management software platform predominantly, but we're also volunteering professionals who have often worked in industry or have been involved with digital change with many organizations, hundreds of organizations across the globe when it comes to volunteering. So last year we were very proud to have surpassed over 100 million volunteering hours powered through the Rosterfy platform. We already have a strategy in place to get that to 500 million and then to 1 billion in the next few years as well. So very much exciting times and lots of growth coming, lots of exciting programs that we're supporting. And of course, we're constantly looking to redesign not just the solution and build new features that support the volunteer community better, but also come up with strategies and ideas and sharing best practice of things that we're seeing that are working really well and working not so well with some of the orgs that we work with. One of the unique things about us is we're doing this globally. So we have operated with volunteer programs in over 35 countries, around about 14 different languages. And actually a lot of the trends that you see across the globe can be very similar. Lots of different challenges. Obviously you have nuances in different markets, but we see all kinds of shapes and sizes of organization that we support. And we work with organizations from events organizations that rely on volunteers. So we've just had London Marathon last weekend. This weekend I'm going along to High Rocks, which is one of the fast growing fitness trends in the UK at the moment. They obviously rely on volunteers to support with the marshalling of their events. Charities of all shapes and sizes in the UK, which I'll talk through some of the case studies of those this presentation, and then also cities and governments as well. So we work with around about 8 or 9 city councils across the UK for citywide programs that support local charities and local events as they come in and out of the different areas across the country. So real wide mix of different programs, and we were very proud last year as well to have made it into the top 50 products in the not-for-profit sector as ranked by G2. So the reason that's so important to us is that G2 is basically like a trust pilot. It's a review site for customers to review our platform from a software perspective, and ranked top 50 globally across the whole not-for-profit space. So very exciting time for Rosterfy. And as I said, we operate across the globe. So we do have offices down in Australia. We've got a couple of small offices across the US as well. And our main kind of base in Europe is in London Bridge, where I'm talking to you from today. And this is where we support all of our European customers, which is actually our biggest region as a company. So just a few things as to why people use Rosterfy and what kind of expertise that we partner with organizations on. It's all really around increasing impact of supporters. So joining up the supporter experience. So making sure that when someone signs up to volunteer or offer their time or to support an organization, make sure they feel welcomed, make sure they get a really positive, world-class volunteer experience that gets them through onboarding and screening steps that are very, very important, but get them through those steps as quickly and easily as possible while saving a lot of time for the team. We have charities who have, people supporting refugees, people who support young people, people who support elderly, vulnerable people. Obviously, those volunteers are hugely important, but they also require lots of screening just to make sure that we've done the necessary vetting and checks on those volunteers, but also lots and lots of onboarding training and support as well. Volunteer burnout is a big topic at the moment, making sure we're looking after our volunteers and our people, but also upskilling them to be able to have the necessary conversations and give support to those mix of roles. So one of the big things that we do to help is making sure that those important compliance steps have been done without making it a cumbersome experience for the volunteer and without making it a huge admin burden for what is usually quite a stretched and small volunteer team within a charity. Outside of that, data security is obviously important, so keeping people's data safe. Quite often with volunteer programs, we store lots of sensitive data around who volunteers are, the types of skill sets they have, the background that they have. So we've got to make sure that data is kept in one secure, safe and stored place, and also understanding the impact. So when people are volunteering, understanding how many people have volunteered, where they've come from, the hours that they've contributed towards a program, and also the difference that that's made. So we do integrate often with fundraising systems on the market as well, to make sure that a charity can see the overall impact of their volunteers and make sure their data is connected across the org as well. So we quite often see volunteers who support with fundraising efforts and fundraisers and donors who come and support with volunteering as well, particularly when there's a breed of corporates and different groups that get involved too. So just a bit more about the market at the moment. Volunteering, if you look at volunteering on the news, what you will see is this steady decline of volunteer numbers. So that is quite a broadly accepted opinion, that over the last sort of 15, 20 years, volunteering is slowly in this ongoing decline. Less and less people are signing up to volunteer, and people who maybe are in elderly volunteers who are dropping out of giving their time to volunteer are not being replenished as much by younger generations. There's a huge mix of factors that tie into that. We're all aware of obviously the cost of living crisis and work commitments that tie into that as well, and just really making it difficult for people to find the time and find the ability to fund themselves and fund their lifestyle, whilst also finding extra time to support charities and volunteer. So lots and lots of factors that tie into it, and lack of flexibility around some of those sign-up processes and supporting people from underrepresented demographics can be a challenge for small volunteer teams. So those are some of the things that generally is accepted in the UK across the world really in terms of volunteering trends. But actually when we compare it to Google and people that are actually searching for volunteering opportunities, what's interesting is that number is steadily increasing. So whilst we're seeing this broadly accepted trend around volunteering declining, we are also seeing more appetite for people trying to find opportunities. And another good example of that is that young people, generally 69% of 18 to 24-year-olds, are looking to find volunteering opportunities, or at least have an intent to go and volunteer. 1.3 million people volunteered with the NHS for the first time in the last couple of years. So that's also really positive trend of people getting involved and helping. And the other thing that we're seeing more and more is corporates. So we get businesses come to us, big publicly listed companies that come to Rosterfy and say that they have X amount of volunteering days that they want to give their employees. And one of the big questions that we get is what opportunities are out there? What organizations can we connect people to? So that's quite often, there's some appetite there. There's certainly appetite, but one of the big trends that we're seeing is being able to find flexible volunteering opportunities. So those corporates are obviously looking for more sort of one-off volunteering or light touch volunteering that can be done remotely. So where possible, it's just trying to think about those different demographics that we want to engage and how do we make it quick and easy to scale out that program. And that is where that kind of streamlined onboarding process comes in. Volunteering on the go, obviously very important. Even in when we launched the mobile app, which was last year, I kind of thought, yeah, this is great for young volunteers and getting young volunteers involved, but actually we've got to be careful of some of the elder volunteer demographics and people who are not so tech savvy. It surprised me because actually we're finding that a lot of the over 65s, over 70s, over 80s, a lot of them have smartphones. So actually we are seeing lots of downloads of the app from that sort of demographic. Not many of them have laptops where they sit at and do online forms and look for opportunities, but they do often have a smartphone and they do find that an easy way to be connected to opportunities. So we are seeing broad upticks in usage and engagement by having an engaging volunteer portal that's in a mobile interface that people can log into and use. I mentioned city programs, so I'm actually signing up at the moment to volunteer in my local area, which is Wandsworth. We're supporting their Borough of Culture year for 2025. Another great example of that as well is we're currently supporting Bradford, who have the UK City of Culture for 2025. And Bradford is one of the most, in fact, I think it is the most diverse area of the country in terms of different ethnic minorities. So the whole purpose behind their campaign is to try and get the community involved with the Year of Culture. So what that really means is they've applied a lot of focus on making sure that their volunteer program is representative of the community and making sure that they actually have the right number of people with disabilities and extra needs and people from all different ethnic backgrounds getting involved in the program. And the way they do that is having lots and lots of different support schemes and partnerships across the city. We've got a whole webinar, white paper, and case study, I think, coming out with Bradford as well that talks about some of their strategies. Honestly, we could talk about those for about an hour. So I would recommend going in and having a look at some of the work that Bradford are doing. And I know that we've got a couple of events coming up with them too. So do let me know if you'd be interested in hearing a bit more about that. Similarly, a small charity we support here in London called London Youth Games, quite close to my heart. I've been involved with volunteering with them for a few years. They are seeing great upticks in a couple of kind of key metrics, both across volunteering. They get young people involved. They form partnerships with universities, but they've also seen a 48% increase in corporate volunteers. So again, looking at those different pockets, not just relying on people coming through the website or being connected to the cause, but actually forming partnerships with universities, local sports clubs and corporates has really seen a big uptick in their volunteer program over the last couple of years. So again, some great webinar content and stuff that we can share from them. Lots of great ideas around things that they're doing well to engage more volunteers with flexible opportunities. As I said, I wanted to keep my bit kind of brief and pass over to Maddie and hear a bit more from Maddie. Very, very happy. There's lots and lots of customer stories we can share and work that we're doing within the sector at the moment. So do feel free to get in touch with us and come and have a conversation. The other thing that we are doing is we're helping volunteer programs from a consultancy lens to track some of those metrics of volunteering. So we are running free workshops at the moment where we'll go through a bit of a questionnaire, a bit of a workshop with your team and understand where you're at currently when it comes to tracking different volunteer data and metrics. And the aim with our customers is obviously we review that every year and try and find those incremental improvements through the platform. So if you are thinking about volunteering, if you're thinking about ways to find more volunteers and get more people connected to your cause, do please get in touch and come and have a chat with us, even if there isn't an initial need to go and buy software at this stage. With that, I'll pass over to you, Maddie, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. I'm going to share screen, and as we say, it doesn't matter how many times you do this, always takes concentration. Hopefully you are all able to, again, can I get a thumbs up? Thank you very much, Pete, from you. Thank you. So hello, good morning, and thank you both to Pete and Sam for my introduction. So I am Maddie Stark. I work for SCVO, so we are the Scottish version of our sister organisation, which you have down south, which is, I just totally forgot what they're called. If I'm SCVO, they're
NCVO.
NCVO. That's the first thing that went out of my head. That will be my age. I'm sure the folk will appreciate that. The job that I do, I've been doing up here in Scotland for 10 years, and as we use the word evolution as opposed to transformation, and I'll get into that in a second. But I work with charities to really help them understand where digital can help increase capacity by freeing up staff time to help staff do more of the job that they were basically employed to do. So it's very much about working with organisations to think about digital tools, digital techniques, digital methodologies, and see, well, how can we use that in our sector to provide the best service as possible, to make us accessible, to make us and allow us to do a lot of the work that we were set up originally to do. So that's really where my role is, and I do that through delivering training, one-to-one support. I run our senior leader programme, I've got a managers programme, all kinds of stuff. We've got all different ways in which in the way that we do that. I've been working at SCVO for 10 years, but I've been in the voluntary sector for about 30. So I've only worked in another sector. I worked for a local authority council for 9 months, and it was the worst 9 months in my entire life, people. So I came back to the voluntary sector, running back, going, oh, I'm so sorry, please forgive me. But basically within that time, I have become what really is called a digital change management specialist. Basically, I'm a trained psychotherapist, I'm a qualified service designer, and I'm trained in agile methodologies, amongst many other things. But I bring that into the work that I do, because a lot of this work, in fact, all of this work that we're talking about, is very much about mindset change, attitude change, and it's about behaviour change. So hence that background really helps drive the digital transformation or the digital evolution forward, because that's the key to this, is all about people effectively. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about 3 key things, which we will get into each one. So there's these kind of 3 key strands that will run through the next 20 minutes. And again, Sam has already touched on these things, and within the Rosterfy, their digital transformation guide, these come up there as well. So I might say it slightly differently or present it in a slightly different way, but the key messages are essentially the same, which for me was a great kind of reason for me being here today, because we're saying the same things, and it's really interesting having a tech company that's saying the same thing. So I'm going to say well done to Rosterfy for doing that, because that doesn't actually happen. Not that it doesn't happen all the time, but it's good to be able to see it. So it's a nice opportunity for me to be able to do that. Again, as we go through this, I would like you to keep these 3 things in mind. So when I do a lot of this work up here in Scotland, I tend to start each session or each training or each event that I do with what I call mantras, but you can call them whatever you like. But these are things to keep in your head as we go through the next 20 minutes. And as you actually go through your digital evolution journey, or to thinking about, if you're thinking about digital, these are things to have really in the front of your head. And the first phrase is change the plan, not the goal. So this is Iron Man, Tony Stark, not relation because he's not real. But the idea is with this one is that actually, as we go through this digital evolution process, we really need to have a clear vision, a clear mission, a clear sense of purpose. What is it that we're doing? What is it that we're working towards? So the phrase would be know your why. So really understanding what is it we're trying to reach. The plan itself doesn't matter. So you can have the best plan in the world, but it really doesn't matter, because without that goal, then your plan is effectively meaningless. So when we're talking about strategies, it's really thinking about a guide. So we're using these things as a guide. They help us get to that end goal, but the plan or the strategy is not the thing. That should be a working document. Your answer to someone else's problem is not the solution. So this is straight out of Service Design 101 handbook, basically. And with this is from the people who are kind of my age, 50 plus. When I was at university, I was always told to use this phrase, be solution focused. And actually what we're hearing more and more now is actually it's about discovery, it's about focusing on the problem. The more you can spend time actually figuring out what the problem is that people have, then the easier it will be to get to that solution in the end. And it's about iterating, working incrementally and testing as we're going along. And the final one is making decisions without data is guessing. And this was actually from a Tech for Good Scotland event. It was a service designer who said this. And basically by this is that we do have a tendency in our sector to make decisions on assumptions, on people's opinions, on perceptions, and really it's not good enough. And that what we need to become as a sector is to become much more data driven, to be doing things on purpose, testing with intent, and using that information to make those decisions and drive us forward. So I want you to kind of keep those three key things in mind. So this next slide is all about the butterfly. We do in Scotland talk about digital evolution, not transformation. And there's my colleagues down south who some of you may know, there's CAST who does very similar work to what I do, and there's the Catalyst as well, which was part of CAST, but I think is now its own entity. And up here we talk about digital evolution because what we found was that the word transformation itself conjures up images of caterpillars and butterflies. The idea is that you go to bed one thing and then you wake up the next day as something completely and utterly different. And then once you've transformed, you're done. You've made that transformation, so that's it, you're done, you don't have to do any more. Whereas we all know with digital that there is no done with digital. It is constantly evolving, constantly moving forward and constantly changing. And what we found as well is that in reality, most organisations go through multiple cycles of digital change. And with that, over time, you're iterating over time, the digital tools change, the processes change, staff and volunteers change, and the environment within which we operate changes. So actually evolution is a more appropriate word because it's these small kind of incremental changes that happen over time, and we're continually doing it. And evolution itself, when we found with our early work, was a much easier word for the sector to use and to sit with, because we found the word transformation, as we said, my colleague Jason called it the fear. The people would get the fear when they heard the word transformation, whereas actually evolution was a more gentler word for our sector to be able to cope with because of that slower incremental pace of change and this idea that iteration was key. And really since the pandemic in particular, what we've seen with us, I mean, again, Sam kind of touched on that with the stats that they've got about the decline in formal volunteering, is that since the pandemic in particular, charities have been lurching basically from one crisis to another. Most of us did breathe a bit of a sigh of relief when Labour came into power in Westminster, but it hasn't really brought us the relief that a lot of us were hoping for. And it is a real tough time at the moment for charities. We are being forced to do a lot more with a lot less. We are having to become as accessible as possible to everyone out there, and we really are being asked to up our game in the way that we perform and what we are asking our staff and our organisations to do. And this for me is where digital can really support us and help us and really play a really essential part in moving this forward. So this is where our digital tools, our methods and our ways of organisation and the ways of working really do help us to increase that capacity, and it allows staff to do more of the work that they're employed to do. And ultimately it lets us really provide that service that we were set up to do in the first place. As a sector now, we're worried more and more about revenue and funding streams, and we're operating in this increasingly risky environment. We're seeing not just local and national politics, but geopolitics are also having this huge impact on us now. And we're having no choice but to do the best with what we've got and to make the most of these resources. And again, that's where digital can really help us. So really with this, so where do you kind of start? And if you have started, you might be stuck, you might have kind of lost a bit of momentum. So it can also be about not just that start of this process, but also reinvigorating life into this process. So you might be on your second iteration or your third or your fourth iteration or your fifth kind of version of this. So it's about how do you keep that motivation going as well? And really starting to identify blockers. So how can you start that, or how can you identify blockers, and how can you keep that process and that cycle moving? And within that, that's where digital strategies come in. And if they are well written and done collaboratively, they can really give organisations clarity and focus and direction, because you're kind of using data as well. So you give a better understanding and a more real picture of where your organisation is. And that can allow you to become data driven, to use that data to identify next steps and to identify blockers, as we said, and can really help use digital to help us support staff. We've also been seeing that the Government of Westminster have been, my words would be touting, that's my word, digital transformation is the silver bullet, and it's going to save us all. It's going to save the NHS, it's going to save us all and transform our life. And which is, I'm sure it will, if it's done in a very particular way. It can't just be rolled out and then we're all expected to use it. It has to be introduced in particular ways, and the things also have to work. That's also the key. If the digital doesn't work, then it's a non-starter. It's not going to go anywhere. But there's also what we're seeing now is we're seeing a much bigger drive to charities that weren't particularly on board pre or directly post-pandemic are now hearing this from the government. So it's now kind of out there, and people are kind of in this do or die situation where it's now time to get on board or not. And for me, again, within that, there's kind of a bit of a panic about getting on board with that. And my kind of words, just, hold fast, take a breather, and just take some time to actually think about what it means for your organisation and what you think digital can do for your organisation and the people that you work with. So this is a kind of as we go into our next slide, the kind of the time to note that there's some key things that we really need to take into consideration as we embark on this kind of digital evolution and really start to work and formulate our digital strategies. So within this, I've kind of come up with 5 key things to consider, but they could be put into 2. I'm sure you could extend them into 10, but for me, this was just a nice way that just says relatively simply some of the key things that really do need to be considered. And I think for me, the most important one is that it's all about people. When we're talking about digital transformation, when we're talking about digital evolution, when we're talking about using digital as a tool, whatever it is, people have to be able to use it. They have to have the skills. There needs to be the culture to be able to use it. There needs to be values within the organisation. So if there is a people problem, digital is not going to fix that. AI is not going to fix that. Digital is not going to fix that. So it's about really having that understanding of who are the people you're working with, who is it you want to engage with this, what is it you want them to do, and really understanding the people that are part of this process, engaging with them, collaborating with them, and communicating with them. As we kind of said already, have that clear vision. So think about that, change the plan, not the goal. A clear vision is key, so knowing your why and also leading from the top. So if there has to be leadership buy-in, if your leadership, if your senior management team is not convinced, doesn't see this as a priority, then it's more likely to fail. We have research, we know that this is key. So if you are the leader sitting there and you're not convinced, then you need to be convinced. Find a way that somebody can convince you that this is what's best for your organisation, because you really need to have that buy-in. You don't need to understand it as a leader. You don't have to be the expert. That's not what we're asking. But it's being able to understand how it would benefit your organisation and how it would ultimately benefit the people that you serve. So it's more of that understanding. So therefore, that will help then drive the clear vision and your understanding of what it is you want it to do. So the third thing is really understanding the problem. So again, as I would say, when I was at uni, it was always about the solution. I remember I had a lecturer who used to, but I did a degree in business, and he used to say, "Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions." And I was like, "Oh, that was like, it just totally got me." And over the last I'm going to go for 5 years, so probably just before the pandemic, just as we were coming into the pandemic, we really started to see this shift to actually moving away from becoming solution focused and to really concentrate on what's the problem. So in the service design words, this would be like this discovery part. So really discovering and understanding what is the actual issue, what's the challenges that we are having as an organisation, that the people that we serve are having, that we want the thing to fix. So what is it we want digital to fix? What's the problem we want the digital tool to fix? So we that example Sam was talking about the declining volunteering numbers. So we know if we make ourselves more accessible as organisations, so if we've got an app or we've got a digital tool that people can engage with, this is likely to allow other people to engage with us who maybe weren't engaging with us before. So actually really thinking about what's the problem we want this to fix, what's the problem that people are having, and really working and talking to the people who are most affected by the problem, starting to understand and recognising assumptions that we're making and really finding out where the gaps in our knowledge are. So looking towards those problems and not the solution. And then the fourth one is data-driven decision making. Now this for me is like, having been a chief exec, it's like, well, why Why wouldn't you use data to drive your decisions? And it's just something that we just don't seem to do as much. And for me, having been in those positions, I kind of always, when I did use data, it was very much what I would say the wrong way around. There was a tendency for us to use data to comply to funders. So we were meeting the needs of funders as opposed to using it to push out to actually work with the people that we're working with. So we wouldn't use it to drive the organisation forward. It was more about keeping our funders happy. So we said that way of working it's no longer fit for purpose. So actually thinking about how are we using data to make our organisation better for the people that we serve? How are we using data to make us more accessible? How are we using data to make us more efficient, to free up the staff time, to allow people to do more of the work that we employ them to do? So how can we use data to become more fit for purpose, if you like, and to stop again, I mean, I'm no longer in that position, so it's easy for me to say, stop pandering to funder needs and actually get on with it and use that to work with the people that we're working for. And then my final one isn't about embracing failure. This definitely comes from the tech and the digital world, this idea of embracing failure. And it's kind of like the second most important one for me, I'm thinking about people. So the chances of us getting any of this digital evolution right first time are probably really, really slim. And if we're thinking about evolution in this kind of small incremental iterative process, then this is where we start to embrace failure. Failure is not the enemy. It can really be one of our most powerful tools and powerful ways of creating a culture of continuous improvement. And it can be a real kind of, I suppose, a real asset when we're thinking about creativity and innovation within our organizations. It kind of helps us prioritize learning over avoiding risk, because we're not seeing failure as a risk, we're seeing it as something that's a natural part of what we're doing, and we can celebrate failure as milestones, so we're changing that narrative about this language that we're using. And also recognizing that it can take courage to fail, and that there is this very much like it's a stepping stone to the next step. So if we're seeing it as iterative working, sometimes we do need to fail to be able to then make it better. We figure out what works, what doesn't, we keep the what works and we chuck out the what doesn't. So moving on to building our digital strategy. So thinking about these two things in tandem, as we've said, if your digital strategy is well written and done collaboratively, it can really give good collaboration, good clarity and focus and direction and a more realistic picture of where your organisation is and where you want your organisation to go. So remember, you've got that vision, and your strategy is just a guide to help you meet that vision or to kind of achieve that mission. And what we talk about here at SCVO is something called optimistic realism. So this is about being realistic and honest about where things are at just now. So before we kind of embark, actually taking stock and taking time to reflect and think about where are we at now? Where is it that we want to go, and how do we think we're going to get there? So about being truthful and not kidding ourselves. And in some areas, we might find that important bits of work are stuck. So starting to understand, well, what's happening there? How is it stuck? And then also embracing the fact that our peers might be well ahead of us, and that's okay. Just like failure is okay. It's okay for us to not be as far forward as some of our similar organisations. I think it was Dr. Rachel Caldicott at the Scottish AI Strategy AI Alliance conference last year, where she talked about FOMO. She said fear of missing out is not a strategy. So that really sticks well for me with the digital evolution. This idea that just because you can doesn't mean you should, or just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean you should too. It's about what's right for your organisation and is it the right time. And we are optimists, so we recognise that with ambition and persistence, we can use digital to create a better organisation, and that we do have the capability of getting there. We also talk about strategy as a team sport. So this is back to that idea about people, conversations, not speculation. So organisations that are in a good place with digital strategy tend to spend their time and energy really getting their whole team committed and involved. This is about doing what you can to ensure people have the opportunity to play a meaningful part in conversations around digital. You can't force people to engage in this stuff, but what you can do is you can give them as many opportunities as possible. So that's the kind of the key. And particularly if they don't have a technical background, because digital isn't about tech, as we said, it's all about people. So actually allowing people and giving them as much opportunity to have that conversation And therefore, that should kind of lead digital goals and plans that are understood and owned by the whole team, by the whole organisation. So it's not just sitting with one person, it's not just one person's responsibility. We've been saying for 10 years that digital is everybody's responsibility within the organisation, so everybody has a part to play in it. And the final two is about having a solid grounding as a springboard. So again, back to the idea about questioning and reflecting on your current digital capacity and your capability. So what have you currently got? How are you currently using it? And how are you currently working it? And this is important because a lot of strategies fail when they misrepresent the organisation's current situation or culture. So back to that kind of optimistic realism, being really honest about where are you at and how have you got there and what changes do you need to make. Making assumptions or missing important stuff means your strategy could lead you right off in the wrong direction. It can pull your vision. If your vision is not clear and strong enough, it will pull your vision off centre and it will get you going in the wrong way. And a good strategy uses solid tested baselines as a springboard really to jump forward. And that's the idea. You're using data, you're being data driven. So you're using facts and evidence to move you forward. And then finally within this bit, when it comes to digital, really, the future is open and constantly evolving. We've seen that with the pandemic. We're seeing that constantly now with geopolitics impacting us. Everything is moving forward all the time. So again, hence the evolution and not for us the transformation. Through the transformation, you transform, then you're done. Whereas for us, the evolution, you're constantly moving forward. And it's the most important investment or time commitments your organisation will be different on the challenges that you're meeting. So thinking about what you might do in year one of your transformation and your evolution is going to be probably very different to year two or your first 6 months or your first 3 months. So again, the importance of having that clear goal and being able to be flexible and being able to move and change and switch direction, or I suppose the business word would be pivot, easily and quickly is key to being able to do a lot of this. So having that in our heads that actually we can move and we can do that, and remembering that what works for one organisation may not work for us. So actually going out there and finding questions and questioning and finding answers to a lot of the issues that we have. And I'm just going to leave you this with this final slide. That digital is a tool. And it's there to make our lives easier. It's there to make us more accessible, to help us do things. It's there for us to take advantage of. And if it's not making our lives easier, then it's about us actually sitting back and standing back and saying, right, do we need to adjust how we're using it? We are each responsible for changing how we use digital. A lot of the time, it's not the digital's fault, it's not the tool's fault. It's about us and our misaligned assumptions about how we're supposed to use it. So that's kind of where we're at and what we're doing. So I'll finish there and say thank you. And you'll get these slides out, and please do email me and connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Always happy to chat about this stuff. I'll stop there. Stop sharing, Pete. I'll stop there.